Okay, welcome everyone. It's so nice to see such a variety of library staff and students, faculty members, alums, and friends here tonight. Hello, my name is Lynn Weinstein, and I am the president of the Catholic University of America Library and Information Science Alumni Association. I am pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, Kate Zwaard. About 1 year ago, Ms. Zwaard was appointed the Director of Digital Strategy at the Library of Congress and is working to empower the institution to leverage technology to reach as many people as possible. Kate previously was chief of the National Digital Initiatives Division, where she established library labs and the new Innovator in Residence program. In her new role, Kate works on bringing the treasures of the Library of Congress to the masses through digitalization and crowdsourcing projects. Kate previously managed the technical team supporting the LC Digital Repository from 2011 through 2016. Prior to that, from 2002, she led the development team responsible for the digital preservation data architecture at the Government Publishing Office. Kate has written and spoken widely on topics ranging from software development to digital preservation. She has been in the forefront of an exciting new effort to expand access to the riches of the Library of Congress. I'm excited to hear about the initiatives that she is leading. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kate Zwaard.
Thank you so much for that really warm introduction, Lynn. I can't tell you what an honor it was to be invited here today. I looked at the list of previous speakers in this series and I was just blown away. I can't believe that my name will exist next to theirs on the website. One of my personal heroes is Henriette Avram, and I love a quote of hers, which is, "I'm not a librarian by training, but a brainwashed computer systems analyst." And it's with her memory that I tell you that I'm also not a librarian by training, but just a software developer that fell in love with libraries, and I'm just so happy to be here to chat with you. So I want to talk to you today about how we can make incremental progress towards exponential change. Because I think all of us will work in conservative institutions, as libraries inherently are, which I think is appropriate. They resist change because change is dangerous, and they need to serve patrons, they need to process materials, and any disruption in that inherently introduces risk. And so how do we make the exponential type of change that we need to make in the new information economy while preserving the core values and functions of the institutions we're in? In this journey that we'll take together, we'll do a couple of things. First, we're going to start with a game, just for the fun of it. And then we'll do a little bit of economics, because I wanted to. And then we'll talk about the digital strategy. We'll talk about some of the projects that we're working on in labs. And I should mention Dr. Megan Ferreter and Abby Potter are here from the labs team. I will be talking about their work, but it's all credit to them because they're two amazing humans. Jamie Mears is not here. She's another person on our team. And Melissa Crawford. So we are a very small team, but maybe too much. And at the end, I hope the economics will make sense, but you'll have to tell me. If any of you are familiar with the weak board and the chess problem, you're going to have to recuse yourself from this. But I want to talk about how exponential growth is so powerful and how our normal human brains are not evolved to really understand them. Because we evolved in a linear world. We didn't evolve in this exponential world we find ourselves in. And so I'd like to posit to you a problem. So let's say I am going to give you 30 days, and every day I'm going to come to you, and the first day I'm going to give you a penny, and the next day I'm going to double that. I'm going to give you 2 pennies, and the day after that I'm going to double that, and I'm going to give you 4 pennies, and the day after that I'm going to double that again and give you 8 pennies. We're gonna do this every day. I'm your penny fairy. It's like the tooth fairy, but with pennies, and then I'll take your teeth. So we're gonna do that for 30 days. How much money do you think we have at the end of this? How much money do you think I'm going to bring to you at the end of 30 days? We start from a penny and double it every day. Does anybody want to shout an answer out?
2 to the 30th.
I said if you know the answer, you can. Did I not say that earlier? So the answer is 1 billion pennies, which is $11 million. And I think even the way I set up the question, you knew it was going to be a lot, right? Because I tried to anchor you in it's going to be a lot. But I think even with that, it's more than you think it's going to be. Which brings me to the maddest I've ever been about a Nobel Prize. So a couple of years ago, I was reading in the Washington Post that Paul Romer won the Nobel Prize for his theory of endogenous technological growth. And I was super mad about it because I had just been reading some of his papers, and I was really inspired by how they might apply to our work in libraries. And when he won the Nobel Prize, he instantly sort of went from an academic that I might be able to get a meeting with to like the Bruce Springsteen of economics. And I'm a Jersey girl, so that's a big deal to me. So I want to talk a little bit about how he couches economic growth theory, and it may, hopefully it'll apply to some library things. So he talks about 3 levers that we can pull to drive economic growth. And those levers are motivation to innovate, human capital, and access to knowledge. And his theory is sort of part of the shift from mercantilism into modern capitalism, the idea that we can grow the economy in itself. We don't need to go invade Peru and steal their gold to grow the economy. We can grow the economy through innovation. But his breakthrough here is saying that these 3 things are exponential drivers of economic growth. So if you increase motivation to innovate just a little bit, it's going to exponentially grow the economy. If you improve access to knowledge in a way that produces economic growth just a little bit, it'll result in exponential growth. And I was sort of thinking about this in the context of our new mission statement, which is to engage, inspire, and inform Congress and the American people with a universal and enduring source of knowledge and creativity. I'm really inspired by that mission statement because it is so broad. I mean, you could drive a truck through it and park it, and I love that. And it really struck me how much that mission statement maps to the drivers of economic growth that Paul Romer talks about. But of course, I think libraries are more than engines of economic growth, and I think we can think of the things that make being a human so wonderful besides basic sustenance. And I think there are these models of happiness, right? So we can track GDP of different countries, but we also there's some measures of like which country has the happiest residents. And I'm not so much interested in happiness. I'm not a practitioner myself, so it's not very relevant to my life. But I am interested in the sort of fulfillment of human potential in those sort of the Star Trek sense. So what makes being a human valuable? Art, video games, mathematics, playing soccer, and how do we exponentially grow the volume of that in our nation? And I think we can use these as sort of a model to think about that. As Lynn mentioned, about a year ago, in maybe January, I think it was January of last year, I started as the first director of digital strategy with an office entirely consisting of me, and with one immediate goal, which was to publish a digital strategy for the Library of Congress. And I won't lie to you, it was sort of an existential moment for me. It was a little daunting. I include the URL here. I hope you'll have a chance to read it. I think we intentionally tried to make it very readable and light, and hopefully you'll find that's the case. But I want to even compound the issue by telling you that the Library of Congress is a very complex animal. And all the things that you know about us, that we have the world's largest manuscript collection, that we have 2.2 million maps that the stacks go on for 2 football fields, that we have the largest collection of recorded sound in the world. We get 11,000 volumes on the loading dock every week through the U.S. Copyright Office and keep about half of that. That's the equivalent of my hometown library. So the scale we're talking about can feel really daunting. And I will also tell you that is just this part of the org chart. I mean, so in addition to all of that, we have the United States Copyright Office, we have the Congressional Research Service, we have the Center for Learning and Literacy that does visitor engagement, signature programs like the Gershwin Awards, we have the Publishing Office and exhibits. So thinking about how do we articulate a usable strategy, a strategy that makes sense is precise enough to be meaningful in the divisions that serve the functional National Library, but is broad enough to be useful to our friends in the Congressional Research Service writing reports for members of Congress. So what did we do? After a long time of thinking about it, we convened a cross-agency group of experts who represented both their own personal expertise, but also the perspectives of their units. We decided to go to the evidence to make it so that it wasn't a strategy born out of just the minds in the room, but that was rooted in work that had gone on through the library. So we collected various reports and ideation sessions, documents out of ideation sessions. The library has known what it's wanted to be when it grows up, which it's iterative, right? We're always growing up for a long time. So we were able to gather this material and extract recommendations, almost one-liners. And then we sorted those one-liners into groups and then took the recommendations out and wrote prose about it. And it was an iterative process, and it was really interesting. We started to use GitHub for a while, and that didn't really work. And so we just kind of iterated through versions of Word docs, and eventually came up with something that everyone was happy with. Like I said, it's online. I hope you'll take a look at it. But I do want to focus on just one part of it. So there are 3 sections. We will throw open the treasure chest. We will, I don't remember what they are. We will connect, we will invest in our future, thank you. And the first section, we will throw open the treasure chest. It's in a way a little bit ironic because we pretend every time we do annual planning that we're for the first time inventing the idea of throwing open our collections, which is in fact actually just our job and has always been in libraries, right? But we say it because people want to hear it. So throwing open the treasure chest, which is really not a shift, but just iterative improvement on what we've always done. The things I'll be talking about next, too, really do focus on this supporting emerging styles of research. That's a key part of what Labs is doing, which is sort of kickstarting how we can support computational analysis of collections. And so once we had the thing published, there was definitely a sense of what now? Like, how do we actually do this? The library has made a really strategic choice to not concentrate digital expertise in one special group, and has made a decision that it's just a part of everybody's job. And I think it's really healthy and sustainable, and I think it's a good next step in the evolution. But we do have a small labs group, as I mentioned. It actually is very small, that whose job it is to sort of catalyze new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things in other divisions. So if we have a division who comes to us and say, we want to try this new thing, you have a group who is expert in the machineries of the institution in making that happen. And that's sort of how we see ourselves in Labs. And I'd like to talk to you about a few of the things that Labs is going to be working on, has been working on. And as I mentioned, we're a really small team. And so it is a constant, and there are so many good ideas, and there's so many things we can do. And as I said before, the mission is so broad. How do we decide what we're going to work on? That is a constant topic of conversation in our staff meeting. And where we really want to focus our energy is where we can be of most exponential benefit. So instead of working on one special view of something, we're working on a framework that makes it possible for other people to make views. And so just in that context. And back to the pennies, to sort of illustrate this point. So we ended up with $1 million. If you know the answer, please do not shout out the answer, because it's really making me sad. But what if I did that same problem and I came to you every day when you brushed your teeth? So in the morning you brush your teeth and I come by, I knock on the door first, don't worry. And I come by and I give you a penny. And then at night, when you brush your teeth, I give you 2 pennies. And the next morning, you brush your teeth, and I knock on the door, I give you 4 pennies. And on for 30 days, morning and night. How much do you think we'll have? Does anybody want to guess?
100 million.
100 million, that's good. Anybody else? gonna feel good to shout something.
200
$200
million.
million. It's a 1 quintillion pennies, 11 quadrillion dollars. But the problem is I won't actually be able to deliver that to you because it exceeds all the money in circulation in the world. And I know what some of you are thinking, that does include Bitcoin. So you can see how like exponential growth, the rate change is almost more important than what you start with. So a small difference in rate change can make a huge difference in the end. So back to this. One of the first things we did when we started Labs was we released the Library of Congress Web API. So this is an interface that programmers can use to programmatically, and some of you here have used it, to programmatically interact with the collections. And it was a thing that we built actually for our own use, for our own internal software development purposes, but if people knew about it, they could use it. So some people were using it for other projects, and we made the decision that we should just, even though it wasn't perfect, publicize it and let people use it. And I think it's one of the examples of a small change. I mean, it was like a yes or no in a meeting, and a website that we put up just to describe it that made a huge difference in just a year. This is Laura Ruble. Laura is a software development librarian at George Washington. And when we decided to release the API, she came during her sabbatical to help us document it. Here she is giving a talk about it to a packed house at the Library of Congress. People were really excited. And she made a few things that I'd like to share with you. This one is called the Library of Colors. So what she's done here is take one of the prints and photographs collections and taken each one of these bars represents an individual item, and each of those colors is one of the dominant colors in that item. So you can sort of get a sense of a palette of a collection. And this is one of my favorites is baseball cards. It's just such a lovely palette. And on top of that, it gives you a sense of like the inks and the common sort of printing mechanisms used in that time. So here's an example of the Civil War maps collection. And this is Abby found this one, I think. So we had one of our curators look at this, and she said, well, those bars of blue are not right because they were not printing in blue during the Civil War. And then we realized they were miscatalogued. They were actually maps about the Civil War, not maps made during the Civil War. And so looking at our collections in this new way exposed differences in the data that we needed to address. And I think it's a really powerful example of how using the API might help us understand our collections and even ourselves, things that we didn't know ourselves. We launched an experiments page with the Labs launch. This is just it's at its core, it's just a website. Right? It's a website that we put up on labs.loc.gov that we showcase experiments on. But it's deeper than that. It's a permission to the institution to experiment and a pathway to do it. So if someone wants to try something, they now have a foothold to grab. Actually, you don't grab footholds. I think that would be really dangerous. But it's just a way that someone can, if they have an idea, they have someone to talk to now. And it led to some really interesting results. So this is a free-to-use browser extension that just randomly cycles you through photographs in the prints and photographs collections. And the reason this was possible was because we had the experiment section. Our communications office wanted to do something fun and serendipitous, and they came to us and we helped them work with the API. We helped them figure out how to get it on the Chrome store, and we counseled the junior fellow who worked on it. And it's a really interesting, I think this is really neat because we serve very well people who have specific research requests. I think that's, we have some reference librarians from the Library of Congress in the room and who are world famous for answering research questions. But if you want to know just what's cool, like what's cool, what's good, what do you have, what's fun, I'm just curious, it's harder to serve those interests well. And so this is one way that if you just want to look at interesting photographs, you can just reload your browser. And I know Megan Ferreter, for example, is one of her stress reduction techniques, so I would recommend it. Another browser that we published on experiments is this congress.gov browser extension. So this, if you install it, automatically highlights bill numbers and links you to the actual bill text in congress.gov. It's lightweight, it's simple, but it increases people's access to information and reduces the friction that they would like. So to open up a new tab, to search congress.gov, it just makes it a little bit less likely. So in this way, we're making it a little bit more likely for people to find primary source material. And I also want to mention that, fun. Fun is good too. And so Laura's experiment showed us the way we can understand our collections in new ways, but it was also beautiful. And she actually made this bag. She printed it on fabric and sewed it. And I think, for me, I find it very inspiring in ways that we can think of our collections as both answers to research questions, but inspirations for creativity, for making things, and so in that spirit, one night I was thinking about like how we might do that, and I mocked up this shoe. So this 3D printing, right? So we have 3D objects in the collections. We have the J.K. Slide collection. This is a sculpture of a jaguar, and this is a 3D printing of that we have a 3D printer in our Young Reader Center. Kids are so tactile. Just being able to feel things helps them understand them. But we're also exploring what research purposes they might have. And we call this one Sparkle Kitty. The person behind her, I 3D printed, but not. We were also pleased to host Jared Thorpe, an artist in residence, for a year. He did so much, and there's a lot on the website at labs.loc.gov, including a podcast that he made, which I highly recommend. He talks to Beecher Wiggins, who I know that many of you are familiar with, about the history of MARC and cataloging, and it's really an incredible piece of work. But I'll just highlight a few of the things that he made while he was with us. So at the same time that we launched Labs and that we released the API, we also released our historic cataloging records as a data dump. So not only just to search online, but to think of them as a body of data. And I don't know, I get a little misty thinking about it because it's the product of hundreds of thousands of hours of expert work. In that, like just a little diamond. And we released it to the world and said, go play with this, see what you can do. And this is the first thing that I think anybody did, well, maybe not the first thing, it was like one of the first things that anybody did with it, was Jared thought about it. And he thought about how you could move through time. And so he asks you to imagine, he picks a number of names at random from a particular year of publication in the records, and it asks you to imagine being at a dinner party with them. So if you're at a dinner party with Arthur, William, Christoph, George, another Christoph, David, Thomas, Luigi, Richard, Johann, Robert, what does that look like? What are you talking about? And then if we change the year, all of a sudden we're in the room with Andrea, Jim, Francis, Alessandro, Ferdinand, Chris, Jan, Richard. What does that room look like? How is it different? What does that say about who was being published? Who are we collecting? In ways that if I made a bar chart, it wouldn't, right? But this is more visceral, more human. So those are all the sort of things that I'm thinking about when we're deciding what projects to do. What can we do that has exponential impact? And I'd like to give an example. It's crowd.loc.gov. So Lynn mentioned a little earlier that we've been working on crowdsourcing, and I'm pleased to share, thank you. Pleased to share that we launched a crowdsourcing effort, how long ago?
6 months ago.
6 months ago. That's wild. It feels like years. And so Megan kindly came over from the Smithsonian Institution to the Library of Congress to lead this effort. It's been really exciting, and I would like to share a little bit about it with you. So in this model, we take digitized images from the collections and put them online and ask people to transcribe and then peer review the work of others. So one or more people can transcribe the collections, and then one person who has to be a logged-in user can approve it. And this solves sort of two fundamental problems, or offers two fundamental opportunities. And one is, how do we increase access and discoverability of archival collections? Which, as you know, we minimally describe. And so if you are looking for Lafayette's papers in Benjamin Franklin's, Lafayette's letters in Benjamin Franklin's papers, you can't keyword search that because it's not OCRable. But the other is, we want to we want people to be engaging with the collections. And because they're online, we can invite more people to be reading primary source material, to be reading about what Thomas Jefferson is saying in his own words. And I think it really gives you a better sense of the person to read what they had to say, right? Not just about them. And not just researchers and scholars, but retired folks, kids, curious, my dad, you know. I told my dad about this project and he said, I would never go into the Library of Congress and oh, thank you so much. And ask to see Alexander Hamilton's papers, but now I can do it. And I think that's really neat. And one of our colleagues in transcribing, these are the William Olin Ward papers. So he, is that right? William Olin Ward, right? So he was a newspaperman, and he, after the Civil War, ran penmanship contests for soldiers who had lost their dominant hand, who were retraining themselves to write. And so you get in this collection the words of soldiers who had come back from war and were severely injured and were learning how to, be able to write again. And this one I found so powerful. Some things are worthless, but some are so good that nations who buy them pay only in blood. I think what's so impressive about this to me was somebody reading an item in our collection and reflecting back on history, but also this text will be much easier to read. And I think we underestimate how cognitively expensive it is for people to read handwriting. And so if you find yourself just browsing through the collections, you have to spend time on each item to see if that's what you're interested in or that's what you want. But if someone else can spend that cognitive energy for you, then it makes browsing the collections a much lighter touch. Here's another one. This one's from the Abraham Lincoln papers. So there are scholarly editions of the first 2/3 of the Abraham Lincoln papers, but not the last third, which consists mostly of letters to Abraham Lincoln, but there are a few of his own works in here. And this one is It's Not You, It's Me, that he wrote to his first fiance, and it is very gentlemanly. I highly recommend using it at home. And so a few months after we launched, we were able to, first of all, complete our first collection, the Branch Rickey papers. So Branch Rickey was the baseball scout who is very notable for having signed Jackie Robinson, but also writes some very, how would you characterize it? Like honest? Yeah, honest scouting reports. They're very, very enjoyable to read. And so we were able to finish that collection with the help of our volunteers and put them back in LOC.gov, which means that there are names in this collection that are now full text searchable for the first time. And here we have Hank Aaron, who is one of the very cool baseball. I know nothing about baseball player, but I think he's a guy. So. In terms of impact, so we have that, but we also have the personal stories of people who have interacted with us through social media and sent us letters. Transcribing Clara Barton's papers is a wild time machine ride that has zoomed me past a seance and more. What an amazing woman. This one genuinely brought tears to our eyes. I've been transcribing today to help keep my mind off the chronic pain I am having. I enjoy doing the long letters and the difficult ones. I feel like that's real impact. And we hosted a hackathon along with the release, and we invited kids, and we had some visitors to the building who took part too. And what was really moving was the intergenerational partnerships. So the kids and the older folks kind of working together to piece through the handwriting. We found that the kids took up handwriting pretty quickly. So I think there's a panic about they're not teaching handwriting in schools. But if you just ask them to focus and to do it and give them a little bit of encouragement, it happens pretty quickly. What's important about this work also is that it is built upon and was made possible by a ton of other effort. And so when I'm talking about incremental improvement leading to exponential growth, the release of the API made this possible. If we didn't have the API, we couldn't call on something to pull the collections out of. We built on the best practices and the lessons learned of other crowdsourcing initiatives, including the Smithsonian and the National Archives. We relied on the Django framework, which is a coding framework that made this happen. And obviously, none of this would be happening without arguable practice and arguable principles and practice and digitization. So there are all these innovations along the way that have made this possible. And in fact, we hope that this innovation will make someone else's possible. We've made all the code open source and available on GitHub. And so hopefully other cultural heritage institutions will try this out too, using the tools that we've built. And so what I want to leave you with today is two things. One is I hope you'll think about this and think about what incremental steps you can take at your home institution to make exponential change. It's not easy in the places that we work to do big things, to do paradigm shifts, but it turns out it's not necessary either, and that we should feel comfort in that the daily steps that we take every day to make the world a little better are making a real impact. And the other is, think about how you could work with us. Do you have students who would like to do projects using Library of Congress digital collections? Do you have classes that you would like for us to talk to? We are very, we have had, these are pictures of our fellows, visiting scholars, innovation interns, and junior fellows who've come to. We'll have another 7 this summer, more interns than staff. It's not really a great idea, but we do it anyway. So I'm begging you to think about how we might help you in your journey to discovery as well. Thank you so much. Or? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
My name is Virgil Young, and I want to first say I'm a military veteran now from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for your enlightenment and educating us. MBA, Howard University, Master of Science, George Washington University. To me, one of the most urgent information needs is the information from slavery here in the United States. I'm an Afro-descendant, and as a child, I was deprived of information about the plight of descendants of slaves in this country. And as you know, there's been traction about discussions about reparations or whatever form that may take. But the first thing in my mind in terms of urgency, not just having the luxury to research collections on French literature, but focus on people and the disparity of wealth all across the world, but here in North America. So when you see a black man with his pants hanging down, or he's been traumatized. Okay, so we need to talk about that. I don't want to pivot off of that too much. But to have information, you talked about APIs, which is the backdoor gateway, but then you talked about digitization. So, but when I heard you talk about APIs, I immediately thought about data analytics and how that information would be used. So I think it's very urgent that the federal government, Library of Congress, has information, because right now the only way we get true information about the slave trade is through Henry Louis Gates and things of that nature. I'm working with the United States Citizens Recovery Act, which has been endorsed by Dr. West, Cornell West. And so we're working on these types of issues. And so this is a project that we want to take to see if we can collaborate with you and identify, get the real information out to the masses of people, like what's going on. As you know, you heard about, and I'll make this very short, 40 acres and a mule. That was supposed to be given to the slaves once they were freed, but Abraham Lincoln was murdered. So then they set up the Freedmen's Bank. And as we all know, that bank that blacks would put money in was looted. And so Frederick Douglass had to go to Congress and say, hey, it was looted. So these are the types of things that people don't even know about. But the Library of Congress, you have that information. that information needs to be shared and put in the public school system. So there's so much to be done to uplift people who have been oppressed. And so that's something I feel very strongly about. And if you want to lift and not take away the wealth that has already been given to certain people, but create new wealth, okay? Preserve existing wealth, but create new wealth for those who haven't had an opportunity. And working with your organization is something that people will be reaching out to you for.
Thank you so much for your comment. I agree that that area of research is critically important. I think this is not my area of expertise, so if there's somebody here from the library who knows more than me, please jump in. We do have enslaved people's narratives in the American Folk Life Center, and our genealogy in our general collections, our genealogy research has some of that material available, and I know NAMAC, right, the National Museum of African American History and Culture has all other data available, but I do, yes.
I was going to say that the gentleman could go through the library's Ask a Librarian service, because we have, off the top of my head, 3 women, 2 of whom work in our main reading room.
Could you state your name, please?
I'm Dana Bell. We have two women who are African American history specialists that work in our reference research services division. One of whom is a former faculty member of Catholic, and there's also a specialist in our manuscript division for African American papers. So I would say go to Ask a Librarian, go to Reference Research Services, go to Ask the Librarian for Manuscript Division, tell them what you're trying to find.
Yeah,
and
I just want to be
help
clear.
you.
I don't want to be an end user. I want to be the person employed or getting the data. I want to be an active participant. I don't want to ask somebody. I want to be involved in the process, but we can take that offline. But thank you very much.
I would just also like to raise the Smithsonian Transcription Center has spent several years inviting the public to help transcribe Freedmen's Bureau records as in augmenting work that was done with indexing as well. So a very active program, and they would love to hear more about the ways that they can connect with any of these efforts and make that information more widely available. It's possible to download those transcriptions straight from the Smithsonian Transcription Center as well. And they're integrating that back into their backend in the same way that we are bringing transcriptions at the library into LSC.gov.
Thank you, and thank you.
Yes.
I currently work at GPO.
Oh.
Sorry, my name is Sam Russell. I currently work at GPO on a digitization project for the congressional hearings. And your API related to the with Congress.gov, I think could be useful towards what they're doing there. So I was wondering if you're working at all with other agencies across the federal government.
Yeah, so actually I'm an alum of the Government Publishing Office, and I consider it my alma mater. And we work very closely with them, especially as sister legislative agencies. And in fact, the bulk data that we make available, the Congress.gov bulk data we make available is through GPO. And so the hearings project especially is one that we're collaborating on, and also the serial set. If y'all are not familiar with the serial set, it is so cool. And we're taking a multi-year process to digitize it, and I cannot wait. It's gonna be awesome.
Question from the prosecutor side. Can you maybe give us an idea of some of the challenges with regards to the technology behind digitization? I mean, you touched a little bit on the challenge of the volume of work you do need to digitize, but what about, I know technology changes. I'm also in technology, and so I know it changes quickly, and sometimes you need to keep up with the changes. But do you face any technology issues, and then how?
No.
Right? And perhaps going forward with the future generations, how does one prepare for such challenges in this area?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the Library of Congress was one of the first libraries to put materials online. The American Memory Project, if many of you have heard of it. And I was just talking with Lynn and Connie in the car ride over here today about how being early actually has introduced complexity in modernizing, because we have all this material on these disparate web pages that need to be now moved into modern frameworks. And I think it's a thing that any organization that has been around from the dawn of computers to now is dealing with. I know it's a problem in other federal agencies. So the IRS just released a report about how dealing with legacy systems reduces their ability to innovate. So for us, maintaining these systems make it really hard to do things. And that's a big challenge. So choices that someone made, 10 years ago and enshrined in code and got built on, that all needs to be unraveled. And, the way we did things in the early days was duct tape and a prayer, right? You had together solutions to make things possible. And you didn't really have an eye toward long-term sustainability because you didn't have enough evidence to understand that. And so there are many things that were just, scripts that someone wrote to move this thing to this other place that are now core parts of the library that we need to just understand and move into modern frameworks. So to me, I think that's one of the most difficult parts, and I think we need a lot more software developers.
Noted, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We will be having a reception later. I see the food is arriving, so I'm quite relieved. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, my name is David Brisson and I'm a member of the LIS Alumni Board here. Before we wrap up and get to the reception, there's a special person that I want to introduce. So every year the Alumni Board has the honor of accepting nominations and choosing a recipient for the Raymond Von Dran Award. This award is open to all LIS alumni and is named after Raymond Von Dran, who served as the second dean of the library school here at CUA. And the award is meant to recognize someone who embodies the qualities that Raymond Von Dran was known for throughout his career: innovation, collaboration, and leadership. And so this year's Raymond Von Dran Award recipient is the Assistant Library Director of the Williamsburg Regional Library, where she has been working for over 30 years. And we were really blown away with her nomination and just all of the ways that she truly embodies those aspects of what the award is meant to represent: innovation, leadership, collaboration. She's shown innovation in establishing a cancer resource center at the library and mobile library services to serve the homeschooling community, and has shown leadership not just in all of the initiatives that she's sought out partnerships to develop, but also by presenting at numerous conferences over the years. And in terms of collaboration, she is a truly collaboration superstar. The word partnership came up again and again, and in fact, she wrote a book that some of you may be interested in checking out called Partnering with Purpose, a guide to strategic partnership development for libraries and other organizations. So without further ado, I would like to give out this award. It's my pleasure to give the Raymond Von Dran Memorial Award to Janet Crowther. posing for photos is an important part of this.
I just want to say brief, I'm not going to keep you between the food. It's Friday night, it's wine time. But I did want to say a few things. I started at Catholic in a track for law librarianship, and that was what I first started out in. And I was with a federal court and with a law firm. But then as life goes on, the library degree took me to other directions, which I think happens to most of us as we move around in our careers. So I'm now in public libraries, and I've been there for 30 years. And what I often tell, well, we have a number of staff members who want to go to library school. And most of that's online at this time. But what I tell them is the library degree is just a really flexible tool. And I don't think that's ever changed. You can take it and work through your career in very different ways, and you're always picking up something that's different and nuanced, but it's not a siloed career. And so I really appreciate this honor that I'm being given. I think that the collaboration is natural through all, that's what librarians do. It's not just a public librarian, it's all of us who work. And so I want to thank Catholic University and the Alumni Association. I also want to do a shout out for Barry Trott. Barry, if you could stand, he's also a Catholic alum. Barry won this award. He won the award 3 years ago, and Barry's the co-author of this book that was mentioned. So let's give credit where
We
credit's
split
due.
all the records, beach houses.
But the last thing I'm going to say is, last night, I don't know if any of you watched Jeopardy, but we all, most of us, unless we are really out of touch, know that there has been a man who has now, he's in his 16th or 17th day of Jeopardy, and he's just nailing it and winning a lot of money. But last night, one of the questions that came up to him when they were doing more of the personal interaction is, how did you prepare for Jeopardy? And he said, I would go to the children's department of my public library, because the children's department would have nonfiction still in book form, and I could very quickly scan through the nonfiction and it would stick. That's how this man prepared for Jeopardy. Now, he put that out there to, I don't know, 35 million people, those of us who are watching it. So I think it's, you talk about exponential impact. This man who's doing so well in Jeopardy hopefully will have that exponential impact on all of the children and the adults who want to learn and want to be either for their own knowledge, for their fun, for whatever it is that, that the libraries are where they need to be. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam Russell. I am in charge of the raffle tonight. Still Stone Scholarship. We're still trying to raise money to get it off the ground. So your contributions are appreciated. I just want to reiterate a couple of the announcements we have coming up. We're still looking for board members to serve for next year. The SLA event, Reinventing Yourself Professionally, is featuring panels that include the alumni Bruce Rosenstein and Ray Maxwell. That's going to be at LexisNexis on May 15th. The cybersecurity workshop is still in development, so please stay tuned. The Beta Phi Mu IOTA chapter annual meeting is going to be at the American Library Association Washington office on May 1st, 2019, starting at 6. And the Ruth Fine Memorial Student Loan Scholarship is due May 25th. So please encourage people you know to apply. And with, what?
There's more in the back, sorry.
I think I got it all.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, the orientation picnic.
Yeah.
I'd just like to thank Kate again for speaking with us. And Janet, congratulations. And with that, let's go network and enjoy some food.
All right.